Good morning. You are joining us from, my name is Abhijit Bhaduri, and I'm the host of this podcast called Career3.o podcast. In this podcast, we actually bring you conversations with some really remarkable people. And you know what makes them remarkable is not their success, but the way they have worked towards that success. My basic day job is that of being a coach to people who are try to re-explore and really reimagine their own career from many different ways. I also act as an advisor to organizations on their talent strategy, and I'm also a keynote speaker, which brings me to the subject of today's conversation. I'm going to talk to you about the career journey today. And for that, career journey, which is all about keynotes, conversations that leave deep impressions in your mind, not just in your mind, but in the minds of millions of people. And so I am really delighted to bring to you a conversation with Monique Ruff. She is the Chief Program and Strategy Officer for TED, of the Dead Dogs fame. She describes herself as the queen of karaoke, and she is also the person who says that she believes that she is really intentional about every little choice that she has made in her life, and that's what makes her different. So without any further ado, thank you so much for being here today, and what a delight.
No, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I've always wondered when you work on a stage like TED, is there anything that you started thinking of as a kid when you were thinking about, what are you going to be when you grow up? Was events or curation or anything to that effect as part of your dream? Or is this something that happened?
I don't think anyone dreams that they're going to be a conference or event organizer. They might think, I'm going to plan parties or do weddings because I enjoy a good party. But I don't think people usually dream about being a conference organizer. So I don't think I've met anybody who dreamt about it. You kind of fall into it. You stumble upon something that you never knew existed. That's what happened with me in college. I never knew this was a job to do conferences. And when I got my internship for this very small boutique media company in Manhattan, I was just blown away about everything about it. Like, you have to raise money, you have to sell tickets, you have to find speakers, you have to put on an event that is fun and engaging. And, I was kind of thrown into the mix of all of that stuff. And then I was like, oh, I'm good at this. I think I'm gonna stay here for the rest of my career. And that's exactly what happens.
When you were growing up, what were some of the things that you did which told you that you are good at these things?
I have an interesting story. It's going to tell my age a little bit, but there was this TV show in the 80s called Dynasty. And I was an 8-year-old little girl. And why was I watching Dynasty at 8 years old? I'll never know. But I was sneaking watching it. And there was this character on there named Dominique Devereaux. And she was the most fiercest woman I had ever seen in my entire life. And she was a businesswoman. And so I said, I'm going to be a businesswoman. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew at that time I stopped playing house with my Ken doll and I became a businesswoman with my Barbie, and Ken became my chauffeur, and I was flying all over the world and learning how to do business. And so I always knew that I wanted to do some type of leadership. I knew I wanted to do something in business. And I never thought events would kind of lead into that area, but that's exactly what it did for me. I think I always had a core of, if you see it, you believe it. Like, if I saw it, I felt like I could have it and I can go for it. There wasn't anything that made me think I couldn't have it. I would say just, staying the course and being consistent to be a businesswoman.
And when you started getting into events and curation, did you really start doing all of it at once, or did you start by first contacting speakers and then you raised money, and then in the third instance, you brought it all together?
When you're a lowly intern, you do whatever job they give you. And when you're working for a small boutique company, that means all of the jobs. If you even have to sweep up before you close the door at night, you did that. And for me, it was raising money for sponsorship. I was 19 years old, calling organizations, learning how to pitch to say, you need to be a sponsor for $25,000 at this awards ceremony. And then it was, okay, we need you to help with PR. So we need you to call these different media papers and pitch about why they need to cover this event. And then it was, we need you to work registration. You have to give out the badges. And, you need to deal with the celebrities. They need to be walked from point A to point B. So go and do that part. So you kind of did everything or whatever was needed at the time. But my first full-time job after that was working for Ringling Brothers Circus at Disney on Ice. The circus, the one and only circus, and Disney on Ice as well, because Feld Entertainment owned both of those assets. I had to be a promotion manager, and so I had to travel with the circus on the East Coast. So all of their stops on the East Coast and do promotions, invite press, do events, and help walk the elephants from point A to point B, because a lot of people don't know elephants can't get on trucks. And so the only way they can make it to the venue is if they walk. And so at night, late at night, they would close down the streets, and we were the elephants' protective barriers, and we had to walk them to the venue at night. And you met all kinds of people who love to watch it and all kinds of people who like to complain about it. But it was really fun to have something so unique. But after a while, you do get burnt out from the circus. You got to move on.
So the elephant was the first big celebrity that you came in contact with.
He was the second. LL Cool J was my first.
Oh, okay. What was that like?
That was when I was the intern at the media company. That was when I was like, oh my God, there is a job where you meet celebrities and they talk to you, and I want to keep doing that. And so, you're a teenager and that kind of wows you a little bit. But yeah, I was working for that company, and he was one of our either awardees, I think it was. And he got up there and he said this wonderful speech. And when he came off the stage, I was like, oh, you did such a wonderful job. And he gave me this huge hug, and I was like, oh, I'm melting. This is the job for me. And so after that, I was like, what's next? If you get to do this, what else do you get to do? And, like I said, being a businesswoman meant travel. And so I was like, okay, I'm falling into these jobs where I have to travel the country, travel the country for the circus. And then it was working for a bridal magazine, travel the country and talking to people on how to plan their weddings and doing events around that. And then I worked for an association, traveling the country on doing events for the association. So, I got to keep doing everything that I wanted to do, just in a way I never thought I would be doing it. I never thought it would be in events.
What is the most demanding aspect of this, constant travel and all that? In many of the jobs, people see the final product. They see the glamour, the success, the money, everything else. But a lot of times people don't really get a chance to see the hard work, the grueling hours, the tears that go behind all of that. Tell me about that.
It's not only tears, there's fires. Like we always say, there's no perfectionism in events. And so as long as nobody sees the fire, you did a great job, because something's always going to go wrong. There are so many, it's a million details in planning an event, a conference. Of, depending whether it's a 14,000 person conference, 60,000 person conference, 100 person conference, it still takes the same amount of planning. You still have to find speakers. You still have to figure out topics. You still have to figure out themes. You still have to sell tickets. You still have to give them access on how they can register. You still have to find financial platforms to help with that. You then have to market. You have to deal with the media, and then you have to think about all of the stuff that happens on site. There's AV and mic checks, there's rehearsals, there's signage and design and carpeting and exhibit builds and all of these thousands and thousands of details. People are only used to just showing up and having all of this stuff just be at their disposal, not knowing that I have to deal with unions. I have to deal with riggers and rigging. I have to build stages. We have to make sure that our speakers show up. We have to make sure the content is going to be good. There's rehearsals, not only just on site, but pre-event. So there's so many things. There are bound to be fires. There are bound to be things that go wrong. Things don't show up. Things have the wrong spelling, wrong colors. And you have to kind of think on your feet about how you're going to solve those issues. And so you become really good at thinking on your feet, become really good at going with the flow and compartmentalizing things so you can keep moving on and delivering a good program. And you have to be detail oriented. You have to stay on top of all of the details.
How do you do that? What is your method of tracking this? Literally like 100 simultaneous projects. How do you do that? Do you use software to do it? Do you use people to do it? Do you use your phone?
One of the core skill sets I feel like I have is understanding how to delegate, understanding when to lean into technology, understanding when to use the 80-20 rule. And so with the 80-20 rule, that means I'm happy if 80% of this is outstanding. And if 20% isn't, I'm still happy because it can't be 100%, not in the work that I do. I really lean on good leaders and good team members. And so making sure that I hire people who are resilient and who can deal in a place of unknowingness sometimes and thinking on their feet and trusting that they don't have to come to me for every little thing, for every little fire. They were hired for a reason. They can handle the job. And if it's not handled as accurately as it could have been, we'll deal with it after the fact. But in the moment, you have a job to do. You can do your job. You don't have to keep running around looking for me. And then, thinking about balance is understanding that there are a million little details and something may get missed. And knowing that we will just solve the problem and become problem solvers. And I like to say we're plumbers, we unclog pipes. And that's what we will do, and we will deal with it. And then during reflection of what went wrong, what were some of the things we can improve, we will acknowledge it. We will have a solution to figure it out for the future.
When you find people for your team, do you really look for people who are like you, detail-oriented, or do you like people who are big picture, creative, can do a dozen things, or a mix of both?
I think you need a mix of both. And you also need people who know how to ask for help. So for me, there's a lot of type A personalities in events because we're just used to being in control and just kind of handling a lot of things. And so one of the things, when I'm doing interviews, what is the biggest moment where you had to ask for help? And it really kind of gives you clarity about when do they know that they can't handle this on their own and that this can be solvable if they just bring other people into the mix. And so if you feel like you're the only one that can solve anything, that's a lot of pressure. That means you don't have the space and the thought process to continue on because you're stuck. You're stuck in this one moment where if you had other feedback or someone else to kind of help you get through it, you can move through it faster so you can go on to the next thing. And so I really think someone who understands when to keep going and when to stop and ask for help, especially in the type of work that we do, is extremely important.
When you think about a setup like TED, what do they look for when they are looking for somebody in your role? I mean, everything is at sort of on a scale of 1 to 100, everything is at 100. Perfection has to be at 100. The speakers are all like VIPs and, these are all celebrities. When you look at something like that, what is the way that you go about planning something like that? And how long does it take to have one mega TED event? And then you also have several other smaller ones. So what does your calendar look like? How do you plan for it?
We never stop planning for all of our events simultaneously. It's just how much more work you're going to put in one event at that same time as the other ones. So I might be thinking about Vancouver, and Vancouver is coming up within the next 6 months. That's going to get 70% of our time, but we still have 30% that we have to think about the next conferences coming up, the small theater events and everything else. There are definitely other things we have to all think about simultaneously. There is no perfectionism in TED. What you see on the TED Talks that you see online are edited versions of a TED Talk. Sure. Sometimes speakers mess up. Sometimes they forget their lines. Sometimes they stumble over something and they have to start over. So what you're seeing is the cleaned up version sometimes of a talk. But when you're in the room with them and you're seeing 2 hours dedicated to one topical theme, because what you're only seeing is 18 minutes of one speaker. We have sessions that are actually an hour and a half to 2 hours long with several different speakers speaking about a particular topic, whether it's capitalism, whether it's self-awareness, whatever the topic is. That's a string of speakers that are speaking back to back when you're sitting in the room seeing that stuff. And so sometimes, they don't have it all together. A lot of times they do because they practice and memorize and recite for months. They are coached. They have to kind of repeat it over and over and over and over again. A lot of them do kind of do it in one shot. Many of them don't. And so that's okay. But you feel the passion, you feel the engagement when you're in the room with them. You are their biggest cheerleader. You want them to do well. You're like getting this knowledge you have never gotten. Like I always tell people who come to their first TED conference is don't get too attached to just thinking that the speakers you know of are going to be the ones that are going to be the big hits for you. You might really love the guy that's talking about the whales in the ocean and never thought you would care about anything like that because he's just an amazing storyteller and knows how to connect with you. These people are just trained or can bring to the table such amazing storytelling skill sets. But even your best speaker, your speaker that's been keynoting for years and years and years, still needs to be coached on how to give a proper TED Talk.
So from the time that you identify a speaker to when the speaker goes on stage, what is typically the duration of preparation?
We're looking for speakers now for next year, Vancouver, and that's April 2025. So we confirm speakers a year, like literally right after the other one ends, all the way up into sometimes a few weeks before if we have any last minute additions. But yeah, we have a full-time curation team. Their job is to find speakers to give TED Talks. So we have an editorial division where they go out and find the speakers to give the TED Talks. And then we do have a submission process on our website where you can submit to give a TED Talk. One of the tips I tell people is do not submit a talk that you've given 100 times somewhere else. Like it's all about bringing a unique spin to something. Do not submit for a talk that's already been talked about. So if you don't do your proper research and background information to see what has already been shared on the TED platform, they're not going to repeat that with you. So it's like you really have to understand how it's unique, different, a differentiator from other talks that might be similar. And you have to write it where the storytelling really comes to life, whether it's in written form or via a video form. But just kind of cutting and pasting something you've done 1,000 times, it's not going to cut it.
When you draw up a roster of speakers, and you have a range of speakers from astronauts to people who watch whales and stars and politicians and people who are inventing new Nobel Prize winners and all that. What is the ratio that you keep in mind for any of these disciplines? Do you first start with science? Is that how you plan it out?
Not necessarily. So we have a theme for each of our conferences for the year, except for TED Next, which is, it has an overarching theme about the future you. But if in Vancouver, we have different themes for different years. So, we have a TED AI conference. Then I think our upcoming conference for 2025 is humanity, and really kind of leaning into a little bit more of the AI talk that's happening around. So there's different themes for things. And so then it's like, okay, what are the sub themes for the big theme that you kind of want to bring to the table? And so, but TED stands for technology, entertainment, and design. You have to have those three pillars. What's coming down the pike that people should be aware at that's game changing, not just in science, but in health, not just in health, but in sports. So everything across the gamut could kind of be stepped up. And then, the flavor of the month is AI. So you're going to get a lot of AI talks as well. So it all depends on what the overarching theme is.
Do you ever have a scenario where the person has done a great job on something, is very accomplished, but is not a good speaker? Do you ever have that scenario and what do? Do you decide to drop the speaker? Do you coach the speaker?
We coach the speaker. And so if you're chosen to give a TED Talk, clearly there is something there that should be shared with our audience. And so we don't just give up on you just because you're not necessarily delivering it in the way that we would love you to. We just keep coaching and we keep working with you, and we want to pull the story out.
When you've seen so many of these conversations and talks and all that, how has it changed you as a person?
I sit there and I'm like, how lucky am I that I get to be in a room and I can hear all these amazing TED Talks that make me cry, make me laugh, make me frustrated, make me think about things differently, make me think about something I never thought about before. You're coming there because you want to be inspired, you want to be motivated, you want to learn. Your foundation is curiosity. You're a curious person. And so to invest in a space for yourself like that, just because you're a curious person, is amazing. So to resonate with a brand just because you want to learn something, you're a lifelong learner, is amazing. And so for me to say that I work for a place like that, like I'm not working for the Googles, the Amazons, or anything for the world where it's a transactional nature to it. I'm just working for people who just love to be inspired and motivated and have this curious nature, and they want to build community, and they want to meet other people like themselves. Like, to me, I feel like I'm lucky that I get to do something like that and still be a businesswoman.
Yeah. You have no doubt sort of lived up to your childhood dream of being a businesswoman, even though you've left Barbie well behind now. And yeah, it's all that. When you talk about building a community, how do you visualize that when you were coming into the role? What did you think about the community building aspect of the role? How did you go about approaching that?
I knew I was still at another job role before I came to TED. So COVID, I'm going to just talk about COVID pandemic times. And so you've seen that when people were able to get out of their homes, how they were craving connection. And so I had to already start thinking about when the doors fly back open and people decide they want to engage in events again, they want to find community. They just don't want to come and just hear someone speaking at them. So I was already in a space of thinking about community building, period, as a whole within my role as an event organizer, because it was such an important aspect to the evolution of where events were going. A person wasn't going to just travel to 20 different trade shows anymore. They were over it. They were like, life is short. I want to really have a full experience. I'm only going to go to 3 instead of 20. And they better be 3 really good ones. And they better deliver everything. They better be informative. They better be fun. They better be a way I connect and have a network. There better be a way that I can do something unique and different that I can't get anywhere else. So I was already in that space. So when I come to TED, literally right after the pandemic, and joined them, it was continuing that thread that I already started, that people have evolved and are engaging with conferences differently. But TED is a step above everyone else because, like I said, it's not a transactional conference. So you have to build community. People have to want to come back because they just made a new best friend. They just were inspired or found a person that can really open the way that they think differently about the world. Community is the heart of TED. And so it was just kind of continuing what I was already thinking about, but upping it a level above because TED already has a strong brand in building community. So what does the evolution of that continue to look like?
When you are looking at building community, is it easier to build community online or offline, or are they two different processes? Which means that if we were to think about TED being only online, how would that community be built versus those who get to be at TED in person?
Yes, it's a big difference. I think it's extremely hard to build community over a screen. I think what TED does very, very well is give access to the information where you don't have to be in the room to hear what the information is. So that's why TED.com, YouTube, all of the TED Talks have billions and billions of views, because you get access to something, whether you're in the room or not. But that's just only one slice of the TED experience. The in-person experience is way more engaging and thoughtful because you can only sit for TED Talks for a certain amount of time, right? We do in Vancouver 80 TED Talks. No one's sitting in a room for 80 plus TED Talks for 11 sessions that are almost 20 hours of content. Impossible. So you have to give them something else. You have to give them more. And so giving them opportunities to engage with new technologies that's not on the forefront yet, but just being built, and they get to be the first to kind of touch it, feel it, experience it. They get to give their own mini talks through our brain dates. They get to say, I want to host a topic on this, and they get to invite our community to join them to have that conversation as a topic. We have activities where we take you outside of our conference centers and you go into the cities and you engage with the different local experiences that happen with other attendees, and you build friendships and community that way. We have workshops where you get to use your hands to build something, create something, do something, like make your own sneakers, or go and talk to the trees, or it's like so many weird, unique things that we give people opportunity where they were like, can you believe we just did that? And just had that kind of conversation with each other. Then you have these dinners where it is either you're playing game night and you're playing games with people you never met before. You're having topical discussions over some major topics that are happening in the world right now over a intimate dinner. You're going to an aquarium and getting to see the whales while you grab something to eat and getting an inside track experience with the curators there, like building community with each other. So there's so many activities and opportunities to connect with each other, not just within the conference, outside of the conference center as well. That really gives you this brain spa, as I like to call it, outside of just listening to a bunch of talks.
From what you just described, it seems to be infinitely tougher to design the off-conference experience, because the conference experience is, in some sense, it's not easy. I'm not saying that. But in some sense, that format is fixed. You kind of know what to expect. And people are used to doing it even outside of tech, which is...
That's right.
They will be able to go to a conference center and then watch some of the speakers. They'll talk about it and then they'll go home. I've never attended a TED, but what it seems to be that the whole process of talking to other people, meeting the unknown person who you become best friends with, going out to experience a city, all of that really means so much more when it comes to creating the memory of what that TED event was all about.
Yes, you have to create a memory, because I always say a connective tissue is always connected to an emotive experience. And if you are having some type of emotion that's positive, that creates a positive memory. And then you're going to want to keep having that. And so you're going to want to keep coming back and figuring out, like, I have people who've been to TED since 1984. They've come every single year. We have people who've come for 20 years. I have a bunch of people who came for the first time last year, and they're like, we'll be back. Because there's like really no space, unless you're going to like a retreat, but your retreat isn't going to give you TED Talks. Like, there's really no space that gives you the best of both worlds of a conference and a retreat combined together over 3 to 5 days, where you get to do all of these things inside and off-site. And people, we always say at the end, you get a TED-ache, because you ache for that experience again, because it's nothing like it before. And I've been in events 24 years, and coming to TED, I never worked an event like TED before, because I've never not done transactional conferences where the end game is business. And so that's not the end game here, even though we have a bunch of sponsors. I'm talking about from major corporations and organizations who do bring delegations, or who do want to kind of have people engage with something new and unique that they're building, or they're trying to get their team members and their leaders motivated and inspired to think differently, so they'll bring them to TED. So, even though there is that component, people come there just because they want to think about humanity different. They want to have optimism, and they want to be in a space where other people are similar to them in that way.
Out of the three, technology, entertainment, and design, which of these is your favorite segment to go to?
I don't know if I have a favorite segment. I feel like I'm a creative person, so I love the design part of it. The beauty, the artistry, the poetry, the dancing, the music. We have music performances. We have dancers that come on stage. Like, you see so many wonderful things that kind of pull at your heartstring, or you're like, this sound is amazing. These colors are gorgeous. So I think for me, just from my personality, I love the design aspect, but I get blown away by the technology. And of course, who doesn't like the entertainment?
When you look at somebody who wants to be in events like you and who's now just getting started, I want to shift that conversation to how do we build those skills to become somebody who can pull out these kind of events, do this incredible stuff. How do we get to do that? What, if you were to sort of help me build that learning path?
Absolutely. So one of my biggest passions is bringing more people into the events industry. Like, I want people to now say, when I grow up, I want to be an event organizer, since like I never had that and people never really had that. And so one of the things that, was really beneficial to my journey was when I first started out in events, I was willing to do it all. I tried different aspects of event. You can get really kind of in a silo in event. You could just do operations, and that's your entire job for the rest of your career. You can just do content, and that's your entire job for the rest of your career. And so I got to be a marketing manager. I got to be a sponsorship coordinator. I was a meeting planner. I did registration. I did operations and logistics. I got to do content programming. So it was good to kind of jump around to see what felt really good for me. But also I did it because I knew I wanted to be a leader. And I said, if I knew kind of what were all of the pain points and some of the challenges that came with these different roles that made a conference successful, I would have more empathy, but also more knowledge on how to help steer those different issues or successes or what have you. And so I remember having this very unique background of doing these things. And I went to a recruiter and they complained about it. They said, you moved around to too many different things. I can't place you anywhere because everywhere you tried this, you've done it. And at first I felt a little bit defeated because I was like, man, I thought I was like doing something that was going to benefit me because I was going to understand all of the components about what made a successful conference. But what this person just wanted to put me in a box and make it easier for them to put me within that next role. So I was like, you know what? After a couple of days, I got over it and I was like, I think I did the right thing. This is going to work to my benefit. And I did find my next role. And so one of those things was to continue down the path that I felt really strongly about. When I could have been deterred, I could have said, okay, I need to stick with one road here and just do content. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do all of these different things because I really did want to understand these different roles because, like I said, in the end, I wanted to be the leader. And then when I kind of got to the point where I've done everything, my sweet spot became content. I stayed in that role much longer than I did the other roles. That's when I said, okay, now I'm ready to step into the leadership thing. What else do I need to do? And so I had this moment where I had to say, okay, what you're doing is just not working because what you're doing is just getting you more work. You're not necessarily moving up and getting promoted in the way that you want to get promoted in. And so I said, okay, what do you want to be when you grow up within this industry? And I said, I want to lead, talking to myself, I want to lead large trade shows and large conferences. I said, okay, so who's doing that? And so at the time when I had this epiphany, LinkedIn was like a resume site. People were putting all of their business kind of on LinkedIn. And so I was like, okay, let me find the people who are running these programs and let me see what they're doing. What's their skills? What do they do? And I made a list from that and said, okay, here's all of the skills that I see that everyone else has. And here are the skills that I'm missing. I'm now going to be more intentional about asking for opportunities for the things that I'm missing. And so when I would go into different roles, I would be very clear about, does it include this responsibility, or this? And could it, if it didn't? And these are the reasons why I think it should, if it didn't. And, I was able to do that through several different jobs. And I was acquiring these skills that I knew was going to make me a stronger leader. And then in the end, I finished my list. I was like, okay, great. I'm a P&L owner. I run full team. I feel like I can be a high-performing leader. I understand how to make revenue. I understand the language of the CEO and the C-suite because I've been getting access to all of these things because I've been asking for it. And I have been very lucky that I've had managers who have provided that for me because I asked. Simple as that. And so, and they saw that I was a hard worker. They understood I was a good performer. And they were like, if this person's interested in this is for a reason. And I think we'll get benefit out of this person kind of having access to these things. And so then I got to the point and then it just kind of took off where I was like, okay, I need to build my brand in this space. So people will come to me instead of me going to them looking for opportunities. And so that's when I started to leverage my voice in blogs, podcasts, LinkedIn posts. I'm a LinkedIn poster consistently. I have creator mode turned on. And so really kind of making sure that I was making the right decisions to showcase my brand. And Ted came to me and, we're like, will you be open to interviewing for this opportunity? And, I did. And it was great. And I'm happy that I strategically made sure I intentionally took certain steps to grow my skill set, but I wasn't in a rush either. I didn't say in 2 years, I'm going to be this. I said, I'm going to just keep acquiring these skills. And when I get to the point where I feel like I have everything that I wanted to acquire, then everything else will fall into place for me because I will be shining a light on myself in a way to showcase my thought leadership. And that's exactly what happened.
In the introduction, I mentioned about your intentionality, and that comes through that, you did not focus on chasing an opportunity, but you instead started to chase the skills that would create the opportunity. So for my big takeaway for what you've said so far, one, I think I like, the way you kind of said it as that it's a place for the curious. So if you're not curious yourself, it's very hard to survive in that role. So in that sense, it has to be this. The other thing that I really took away from what you were talking about is how do you build that capability of I need to do all the jobs in the beginning of my career so that I can then pick and choose and say that, okay, here are the things that I like and I don't like, and you keep building your skills in the wherever you have those gaps. So is it therefore reasonable to say that you should really start off your career as a generalist, doing everything before you specialize in one thing, or before you continue to be the mega generalist?
Yeah, I think sometimes you feel like I graduated college and I'm supposed to know what I want to do with the rest of my life. And that's a lot of pressure because you don't even know yourself. And so I think I was conscious of the fact that I didn't want to put that pressure on me. Like I knew I enjoyed events. I knew I did a lot of things within it, even with that internship for the first time. I didn't know where I wanted to stay. I didn't know if I had, what road I wanted to kind of stay in. And so I was like, I'm going to give myself the space while I'm young, because I heard it all the time. You're young. You need to just enjoy that and, figure it out. And I never had a parent who was like, you're going to be this, you're going to be that. Like, I didn't have that. I was blessed to be given space to figure out my life, but I was always a hard worker. So having a job was never a problem. Always stayed on top of my bills, never a problem. So it was just like, I crafted a space of me trying to figure out who I was, what I would like. I didn't fall into this pressure cooker of by 25, I have to have it all together, because I didn't. I did not have it all together at 25. I started getting into leadership roles in my 30s. I feel like there's still more growth in me. I don't feel like I'm at the top of my game yet. And I feel like I'm doing really, really well, but there's so much more for me. And then I have an act 2. I feel like once I'm done with the events, then I'm going to do my act 2, and I'm going to enjoy what that's going to look like for myself. It doesn't stop for me. And so I'm just kind of enjoying the journey. I'm enjoying the different things I get to engage with. I'm enjoying the fact that I get to work at TED. And if there's the next thing, I'm going to enjoy the next thing. And if I don't, I'll find something else I'll enjoy. And like, I'm just living. And so I think when you have that kind of spark within you to just engage and find joy, to me, the joy is the outcome of everything, not necessarily just the title of something.
You talked about knowing yourself. And what was that process like? How did you sort of learn? Give me an example or two about events that happened and that taught you something about you, and then you kind of built that in.
I didn't beat myself up over the mistakes. And so I think that helped me take more risks. Because I think you get risk averse when you kind of beat yourself up when something didn't fall right for yourself. And you're like, I don't never want to feel that again. What happened with me was I was like, oh, I can get through that. So if that happens again, I know how to get through it. And so that's the kind of perspective I would have on things. And so I would make these mistakes. I would take a job that maybe I wasn't really ready for and I thought I was, and we parted ways, and I had to figure out where's the next job going to come from. There was different organizations that I joined that I thought I would enjoy, but I didn't. And so I had to move on from that. There were different roles where I was like, yeah, this is not for me, even though I'm trying it or whatever. And then I moved on from that. But the thing I think it's all about having the resilience and the grit to say, if something goes wrong, I will figure it out and I will get through it. And that has kept me opening up different opportunities each and every time. It hasn't stopped anything for me. So even when I messed up, it was fine, got through it. Here's on to the next thing. I am a work in progress, and I think that will be me forever.
On the day you've made a blunder, something has gone horribly wrong, how long did you linger on with that? And what does that evening look like? You've had a very, very major failure, and you come home. What are you thinking of?
I've come home and felt defeated, and I gave myself the space to have that emotional reaction to whatever that was. But it was like, okay, now what's next? Like, what do we need to do to get through this feeling? Don't fight it, because I learned about myself that whenever I was trying to fight it and pretend like I was okay, it made everything worse. Made everything worse. And so I was living in it longer because I'm trying to fight it instead of just feeling it, get through it so you can move on from it. And so, like I said, I'm a big person, I'm a big believer about the 80-20 rule. I do not believe in perfectionism. And so that has helped me as well, because a lot of us women really have this thread of perfectionism that really, like, if we are not 100% for the job, we're not going to apply for the job. And so we're missing out on all of these wonderful opportunities because we believe we have to be 100% at everything. Well, nobody's 100% at anything. And so kind of having that recognition and realizing that part of it really kind of said, I'm going to go for this stuff and let's see what happens. And it will work out or it won't, but there will be something else behind that because I'm a go-getter. I'm intentional. I'll go to the next person. I have a big network. I have connections. Like there's always something in a way that I can kind of configure my life to make it work for me, even if I'm paused in one particular area of it.
You've also mentioned in some of your interviews, you've talked about the value of mentorship and sponsorship. Explain to me the difference.
Well, I've always had mentors since the beginning of my career. And so that was to me, people who always gave me really good advice, give me really good directions. How can I solve certain problems? But when I had got a sponsor, which they didn't know at the time that's what they were to me, they gave me access. They were the ones that were letting me into a meeting that I did not need to be in. But, I asked, could I have access? Because I really wanted to understand, how can I convince the C-suite to invest or give me opportunities for different things, not right now, but for the future. And so they would open these doors for me, or they would say, oh, bring Monique onto this project, or they would speak my name in rooms that I was never in, and I would get these opportunities thrown my way because someone said, oh, she's really good at such and such, bring her into the mix. Those are sponsors. Those are people who are giving you access to stuff you would have never had access to unless they're the ones that opened the door, spoke your name, referred you to something, and so I had many of those as well. And those were the ones that were, the mentorships were game changers, but the sponsors were life changers.
Oh, I love that phrase. The mentors are game changers and sponsors are life changers. Yeah, that kind of in some sense sums up what you're looking for. What do you look for in the sponsor? Do you look for somebody who is like a role model for you, or it doesn't matter as long as they can look at you objectively and help you grow? That's what matters, even though they can't do it themselves. Because I've heard both versions of what works, and sometimes you say that I don't really need that person to live up to whatever they are advising me. As long as it benefits me, that's what I will take. What's your view on that?
The first thing that's extremely important to me when it comes to a mentor or sponsor is I have to like you as a person. I don't care what doors you can open up for me. If me and you can't vibe, or we don't have a good rapport, or there's something where your personality does not meet mine, we're never going to connect. I like authentic connections because I'm an authentic, straight shooter type of person. And so we have to really have a really good vibe together and really enjoy being around each other. So what I did with my particular sponsor is I watched this person and how they were interacting with the leaders within the organization, but also how they treated other people. Like if they were helpful people, like they would offer help or they would offer an opportunity. Before I even approached them about anything, I would just watch and see kind of how they were as a human being. And then also what type of access did they have to things, people, places, and things. And so if they have both of those things, then I was like, okay, I need to approach this person for an opportunity because they're open. They're good people and they're friendly people and they give opportunities. So this is one of the people that I need to make one of my sponsors. And so that's kind of the core for me. I have to like you as a person. I don't care what you can do for me.
You've seen so many people who the world looks up to as role models. If you were to be asked about your favorite TED Talk, what would that be?
Reshma Saujani is what I say in all of my interviews, because teach girls bravery, not perfection, because I have seen people take themselves out of the mix of opportunities that could be life-changing for them because they didn't believe in themselves, because they weren't brave, they were risk-averse, they had imposter syndrome. They really just did not go for something that was presented to them that could really be a life-changing moment for them. And so for me, it's just like, I don't want to be that person. And I don't want to teach the next generation to be this worrier about perfectionism and feeling like they don't belong in the rooms. Because guess what? I've been in rooms where other people really don't belong in those rooms. And they're in those rooms. So I was like, if they're there, I know I belong.
Another theme that I must say, which I resonated with in our conversation today, you talk about this 80-20 thing multiple times. And I think somewhere that's that 20% that you're able to let go, of it not being perfect is what allows you to experiment. Because, in some sense, whichever way you frame it, that I spend 80% of my stuff perfecting what I am already good at, but I'll spend 20% of stuff doing things I'm terrible at and get better. or I'll do new things which, I have never done before. What is the 20% you are spending time on today? What are you trying to learn?
Oh, there's always a 20%. So even like with my roles about how do we think about marketing differently? How do we think about engaging a new audience with TED? We're trying things that TED has never tried from a marketing standpoint. We're building events that we've never, the Future You, like that's never been a conference for TED. Like we're doing things that, this is the first time we're launching TED Next. I feel it's going to be successful, but who knows what comes with some of that success or if everything will go over the line the way it's supposed to. We're working so hard. We're putting in a lot of effort. We're being creative. We're trying new things. Something is bound to go wrong out of that. And if it does, we're going to learn from it because it's going to be better next year, even better next year. The way this team is such a high performing team already, it's going to be phenomenal, whatever we put to the table. But if there's some fires in the back, you may not know about it, but we will make sure that we improve upon that for next year. But you can't take risks if you don't feel comfortable being uncomfortable. And so that's the thing that I have to I built into the team. And when I told my team that I believe in the 80-20 rule, the way their shoulders dropped and the way they took a breath, oh, okay. So let's we can just figure this out. Yeah, that's it. Let's try to figure this out. And we're going to do the best we can because I know you have the skill set to make it amazing. And it will be fabulous next year if it's just amazing this year. That just took a weight off their shoulders to say, I don't have to be perfect in everything, but they want to work hard because they want to see the success of something. They care a lot about being great high performers for themselves, and then TED gets the benefit of that.
Thank you so very much, Monique. It's just so fascinating to see how you've thought about an already terrific organization and an already terrific event, how you're sort of bringing your ideas and leaving a legacy on that. It's truly inspiring to know that. And thank you so much for talking to the audience. And if they want to get in touch with you, is LinkedIn the best place where they can find you?
That's my platform, LinkedIn. Yes, absolutely.
That's where you hang out. Okay.
That's where I hang out.
Thank you so very much for being here. And I look forward to continuing our conversation another time as well. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you for having me.